Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and this is the topping Centaurus R2R digital to analog converter. That's right, this is a resistor ladder DAC from typically Measurement Excellent Chasing, there we go, audio company topping. This will set you back $999 US. It comes in two colors, this black here, or there is a silver. This was loaned to me from Apos Audio. Apos has asked nothing in return other than a fair and honest evaluation, which you are about to receive, and also an affiliate link. So there will be an affiliate link down in the description. So if you like what I have to say about this product and you want to buy it, please consider using that affiliate link. I will get a small kickback if you do, and that just helps me keep the channel running. Alright, so if you are familiar with my channel, you know that I have been quite critical of topping and their approach in the past. It has been a while since I have reviewed topping gear, so I go into this with hopes that they have improved the sound at least to my liking. Did they do that here? Find out right after shameless self-promotion.
Hi, it's me again, 14 months later and a whole foot taller. Now, since Wave Theory liked the first 10,000 subscriber play button I made him, maybe he wants a 25,000 subscriber play button. This can only happen if you subscribe, though. Now, since over 60% of the watch time comes from unsubscribed viewers, I'm going to need you to subscribe. You can also sign up for his Patreon or send him money in PayPal. Links in the description. Now, on to the video.
Please allow me to lay just a little bit of groundwork here to kind of contextualize where this review is coming from, because I'm going to try to declare some biases and all of that to help you, the viewer, understand my position on this product. And just real quick, what is my position on this product? One, it's probably my favorite topping DAC so far. I think this sounds better than any other topping DAC out there. Unfortunately, that does not mean that it sounds like the best DAC that is available just under $1,000 US. It gets much closer than topping DACs of old in that price category, much closer to the market competition that is, but doesn't quite get there. So I'm going to try to unpack all of that here as we go through this video. Now, I am, just because I want to be fair and ethical here as much as I possibly can, I'm going to declare some of my own biases here and some of my my experiences with topping, and just a real quick rundown of like why I think their approach is actually limiting their market competitiveness in terms of listening enjoyment against their competition. So let me run through that real quick here, and then I'll also say here that, like, because I'm going to add that in here, we could be here for a while, so I will timestamp this video out. Feel free to use those timestamps, jump around, and watch the stuff of most interest and relevance to you. Okay. So, I've reviewed several pieces of topping gear in the past. It has been a while because, generally speaking, I have just not liked them. Okay, I do not find their sound quality to these ears to be anything, up to this point, to have been, frankly, anything remotely competitive to their competition at the various price points. Okay, and I was unafraid to say that. And Apos Audio, a retailer there who lent me this piece too, to their credit, has allowed me the editorial freedom to say that, even though that may not be the greatest for their sales. And of course, it's also not the greatest for me either, because it probably reduces the possible affiliate link revenue that I will get for me to say that. Okay, but they also, Apos said, you know what, like, this isn't benefiting anyone, let's just take a break from topping for a while, and I agreed that was probably the right call, and we did that for close to a couple of years, I think. Like I said, it's been a good while since I have reviewed a piece of topping gear. Well, when the Centaurus came out here with its different approach, being an R2R approach, that got me curious. And it's like, okay, maybe it's time to check out topping again. And I come into this with high hopes that they have really figured it out, right? And made a product that, to my ears, was sonically competitive with its competition in the market. So again, I came into this very hopeful that that was the case. So that's one bias that I'm going to declare out there in front. I really did come into this very hopeful and hoping, really wanting topping to have gotten over that hump, so to speak. Okay. But I also came in highly skeptical, and that is because to me, Topping's approach has limited their sound quality, quite frankly, in some very key ways. Topping's approach has been to maximize performance on a very narrow set of measurements. Okay, I have joked before that Topping's ethos is to tickle an audio precision measurement box in all of the right ways. Okay, I'm probably going to give the title of this video something clickbaity and immature, but hopefully funny, like saying that, to kind of put it simply, Topping's approach up to this point has really been to punch the competition right in the SINADs, right? Like, they have just gone for maximizing that narrow range of measurement scores there, like the Big Six Big Six measurements that Audio Precision talks about. They have a whole blog about that. I will link to that blog down below and everything. Some really fascinating stuff in there. Okay. And while I get the impulse to maximize those measurement values, because music, sound waves, are built on pure sine waves, right? On pure tone sine waves, added up again and again and again at different frequencies to create the music waveform that we hear. I get the impulse to make sure that a piece of gear is maximizing the quality and the clarity to which it can electrically pass those very simple sine waves, or in some cases, very carefully chosen and put together combinations of sine waves, if we're talking about a multi-tone test and that sort of thing there. Okay. The issue that I have with that is, like, one, that's not music, right? Yes, music is sine waves, but it is a summation of sine waves, all stacked up on top of each other, and often in somewhat unpredictable ways, because there is like a nearly infinite combination of voices and instruments and melodies and harmonies and rhythms and all of those kinds of things that we humans can put together in ways that we call music, that just is not going to be captured by a simple sine waves or a set number of predetermined multiple tones all at once in a very predictable and crucially static manner. Because music is dynamic. That waveform changes all the time. The test tones that often get put through these things are more static, looking for steady state behavior. Okay, so furthermore, there is just no peer-reviewed scientific evidence out there that maximizing the performance of the Big Six measurements that audio precision rigs measure, or multi-tone tests, or that sort of thing, there is just no peer-reviewed evidence out there that maximizing those things actually increases subjective listening enjoyment, okay? There have been no blind tests, no studies, nothing of that sort presented in peer-reviewed journals that back up that basic idea. We're all basically still looking at conjecture here in terms of what we like and what things should sound like and all of that, okay? Don't believe me? Go to scholar.google.com right now. That is a search engine that searches like the repository of all of the scientific and professional journals out there, okay? And just start searching in there. Things like audio, SINAD, blind test. You're not going to turn up much of anything at all that is relevant to that, okay? Believe me, I have tried. The day before filming this, I tried several combinations like that. And it just really isn't there, okay? And in particular, it's not there when you talk about putting all of them together. SINAD, THD, okay, frequency response, all of those kinds of things that you frankly see on ASR. There's just no evidence connecting that the collection of those things doing really well actually leads to increased subjective listening enjoyment over and above something that does not measure as well. Right? Okay. So just keep that in mind here, that we're still in unproven territory, very much so, on that approach. Okay. I think that Topping has, with their ethos, they've been so focused on that narrow range of measurements and breaking down music to perform as beautifully as it can with the building blocks of music, that, you know, the foundation of music, that they forgot that there's also a superstructure to music, right? In a lot of ways, in my opinion, Topping's approach has been akin to looking at the foundation of a building, like going up to a foundation stone, measuring its length, its width, its depth, even its material composition, okay, its structural integrity, possibly even measuring the soil composition underneath that foundation stone, and then stepping back and going, I now know what it is like to stand in the Sistine Chapel, okay? And it just doesn't work that way. Okay, it just does not work that way. I wish that it were that simple, but unfortunately, we cannot replace doing the work of our own ears and figuring out what it is we actually like. Okay, as we explore this hobby. Okay. So that is a long-winded way of me declaring my other bias that you could say is against topping. And I just want to get that out there so that you, the viewer, can understand where I'm coming from when I review this topping piece, that I am very hopeful that they are starting to figure it out. But I am also quite skeptical just because of their ethos as a company and the approach that they have chosen. I don't think that it really does lead to improved music listening enjoyment, and I hope that I have explained why. Okay, with that said, let's get into my evaluation of the Centaurus DAC here. Okay, features galore, right? So resistor ladder DAC here means that there's no DAC chip. There's no like ESS or AKM or Cirrus Logic kind of DAC chip in there. It uses a network of resistors laid out in a geometric pattern that looks a lot like a ladder. So you'll often hear R2Rs called ladder DACs as a result of that. Okay, to do the digital to analog conversion there. It will decode PCM files up to 32-bit 768 kilohertz. It will also decode DSD files up to DSD 512 from certain inputs here, which I'll show you on the back panel here as well. It has an XMOS USB controller in it. I forget the number, so I won't say it, but I will link you to Apos's website where you can read all about those finer details there. It also has a Bluetooth in it with LDAC. I believe it's Bluetooth 5.1. in there. It comes with a remote control. There is onboard 10-band parametric EQ if you are interested in that. Okay, so like I say, a lot of features on here. You get this nice little display screen on the front, which I will take a thumbnail of that screen lit up so you can see what it looks like. There are a couple of touch-sensitive control buttons right here on the side that you may or may not be able to see. When it's lit up on the screen, you can see them better. Okay. Up-down arrows for volume and navigation here, power and select. If you want to navigate the menu from the front panel, you can. The remote control makes it far easier to do so, though. All right. On the back panel, we do have a lot going on. We've got power input here. We've got 12-volt trigger in, out. Okay, we have a plethora of digital inputs here. Okay, we've got multiple flavors of SPDIF input in the form of Toast-Link optical, okay, RCA coaxial, and then AES 3-pin XLR right there. Here is the stem for the Bluetooth antenna. Here is the USB input, and then here is the I2S input. And then over here, we see one pair each of the analog outputs, balanced 3-pin XLR, and then single-ended RCA right here. Okay, so it is a pretty fully featured device. Let me show you the remote control real quick. Here is the remote control. Fairly simple, straightforward, gets the job done. Definitely makes menu navigation a lot easier than using the front panel controls. So, I mean, don't lose this. It takes, I think it's AAA's, yes, pair of AAA batteries, which are not included. So you'll need to provide those on your own, okay, when you actually buy and use this device. Okay. Typical like topping aesthetic and footprint here. It is a smaller, more compact device in there. So, I mean, it's placement friendly. It does not get particularly warm or anything of that nature. So that's something to keep in mind there. Okay. And like I say, feature rich. Like for the price point here, and this has been true of topping DACs, like they are feature loaded. They can do a lot of things. Like the output level on this is variable, so you can use it as preamp if you want, and all that sort of stuff. So I mean, just feature laden. It will serve a lot of use cases there, just in terms of its feature set. Let's start diving into the sound then. And to talk about that, I'll first list the test gear, of course. So I listened to digital files, either lossless or high-res FLAC files or DSD files played locally over my Roon network here. In the case of FLAC files, some of them could have been streamed from Qobuz, again through Roon. A couple of Roon endpoints fed this device here. One of them would be a FIO SR11 routed through a Singer SU6 DDC, and then I checked both I2S and not both, all three, I2S, AES, and coax SPDIF outputs from the SU6 into the Centaurus here. I also tried a direct USB connection from a Roon endpoint that was my Cord 2Go streamer into a 2U DDC, and then that has a USB output on it into the USB of input of the Centaurus here. And then I also moved it to a different system where the source was a Mac Mini playing Otter or running Otter Vana softwares, and this was with the express purpose of being able to check highly oversampled files that were made by PGGB or Pan Galactic Gargle Blaster. So direct USB connection from that Mac Mini into the Centaurus here. Okay, from there, the first couple of systems that I mentioned, there was a couple of different amps that got routed through. One of them was the, I have been saying Aoun, but I learned at CanJam recently it should be Ane. Okay, so Ane S17 Pro Evo amp. Also my Vioelectric HPA V281 was in there. There was an XLR switch, a Little Bear XLR switch in between because I had two other DACs, the Live Harmony Micro DAC and the Shit Bifrost 2/64 that were in that same setup, so I could switch between all three of those DACs to compare this to. So we'll talk about the comparisons with this here in a little bit. Okay, on that system there. And then headphones from there have been manifold at this point because I've had this for a while. Some highlights, this is not necessarily all of them, but HiFiMan HE1000 SE, no, not SE, excuse me, Unveiled. HiFiMan HE1000 Unveiled, both Susvaras, the original and the Unveiled as well. Focal Utopia. I have had others in for review that got some time on here, like including the SJY Horizon Closed Carbon. There were others, but there was high-end stuff here to like really evaluate the sound on that. On the other system there that was connected to the Mac Mini, this was again through an XLR switch and then into my LTA Z10E amplifier, okay, driving things like the Susvara Unveiled in there as well, just to get a feel for what this would do with oversampling. Okay, what did I learn here? As I mentioned already, this has been the topping DAC that I have enjoyed listening to the most. There were times that I thought it was getting reasonably close to the performance of similarly priced R2R competitors like the Live Harmony Micro DAC or the Shit Bifrost 2/64. Again, the Bifrost is not a true R2R. It is multi-bit, which is basically R2R on a chip, but close enough for comparison purposes. The Micro DAC from Live is an R2R DAC. That's $994, so a very direct competitor right there. Okay. And at times I thought it was getting really close to those. The frequency response is, as you would expect from a topping, quite neutral, right? There might be, as with other topping DACs in the past, just a slight roll-off in the deep sub-bass, okay? Didn't really get in the way a whole lot in there, but yet, I mean, just like ruler flat frequency response, and it sounds like it, right? It just sounds like it has a very even, well-balanced tonality that's really not emphasizing any frequency range above the other. The balance between fundamental frequencies and their harmonics seems pretty spot on there. So there's not really a whole lot to talk about in terms of frequency response perceived flat, okay, neutral, however you want to describe it there. Now, the topping squeaky cleanness makes it in here, like black void kind of sonic background. That's a good trait that they've had. That makes it in here as well. Okay. From there, the presentational issues are where I start, or presentational aspects are where I start to have a few issues in here. It's a bit flat sounding. And when I say flat here, I mean that the dynamics to me are just a little bit on the squelched and dull side. And then the spatial presentation struggles a little bit with overall holography and three-dimensionality in comparison to its similarly priced competition. Okay. So those to me are like the biggest things. So like the treble is nice and clear. Like there's very rarely any sibilance here. But the issue with that is like there's not a whole lot of like life or air or character to the top end as well. It sounds like it's going out of its way to be proficient rather than trying to sound like the real thing in some ways there. So that was one aspect of it. Again, the depth of the sound field is not bad. It's definitely deeper and more three-dimensional in its spatial presentation than I have heard from any other topping DAC so far. It just doesn't quite reach the level of like the micro DAC, for example, and what it is able to do in terms of three-dimensionality. And that is most noticeable in the depth dimension. It's not as deep sounding. It's not as layered in the depth dimension as that micro DAC is. Okay, spatial separation is just also kind of okay in there. It's fine. It's not great. It's just a little bit off the pace, I think, for $1,000 DACs. Okay, as is determined by the rest of the market there. So, one thing that I will say here, though, in that one area where this DAC improves over previous topping DACs is like the editions of the D90 series that I had before, and then the cheaper models, I could hear a change in the quality of the spatial presentation and the overall quality of the sound when music went from being relatively simple or small scale to being complex and large scale. So music that has more simple instrumentation to it, right? It's just a vocalist and an acoustic guitar, just piano music, or a string quartet. Stuff that is smaller scale, there's less going on in it, has always sounded really strong on toppings. I noticed this in particular with the D90, whatever edition of the D90 I reviewed. I'd have to, link is down in the description. Where, and like, I remember very vividly, the track was In the Hall of the Mountain King, okay, as performed by Herbert von Karajan and all that. I'll put a link to that track down below as well. That track starts off smaller scale, just a couple of instruments doing their thing. And then the whole symphony orchestra comes in. The D90 was so clean and clear and well done overall when that music was simple. But then when the whole orchestra comes in, the spatial presentation, the detail retrieval, the resolution, and all of that just kind of got all muddled together, got a very mushy and poorly separated presentation. Whereas things like the Bifrost 2 and the Ares 2 and the Denafrips Ares 2, Musician Pegasus, okay, etc., and other Delta Sigma DACs around there, because the D90 is Delta Sigma, okay, didn't care. They just yawned and said, give me more, right? They didn't change their character when music went from simpler to busier. Okay. To the Centaurus's credit, by the way, that phenomena, if you call it, to me, is very consistent with a product that focuses on passing simple sine waves really well and simplistic measurements really well, but doesn't necessarily focus on getting real, true life music waveforms quite correctly, okay? Anyway, the Centaurus, to its credit, does not experience that change. It just goes from being okay but not great with simpler music to okay but not great with more complex music. So they've at least kind of solved that particular problem of the change in performance with musical complexity and scale. All right. So then, that's where I come from. It's like, yes, this is probably the most competent topping DAC I have heard so far. It just doesn't quite catch the competition. Like I've mentioned the Bifrost 2 and the Live Harmony Micro DAC. And because I have that XLR switch, I was able to I set all of that up, and then I just got busy with life. There was a can jam in there, and then we did a family camping trip and all that. And by the time I got back to it, I was like, shoot, is it the Micro DAC that's on input X, or is it on input Y, and the Centaurus is on X? Like, I just honestly could not remember. I'm like, well, that's kind of a close blind test then on here. Let's listen to the two of them right there. And I had them connected via RCA coax, okay, because the Singer SU6 has 2 coax outputs, so I was able to connect that and the live micro DAC in there. And as I was switching back and forth between the two, I was like, okay, whatever is on X is more dynamic and lively. There's more activity in the sound, but not in a forced way, in a way that sounds more realistic and lifelike to my ears. It also has a much more three-dimensional holographic, like more definition to the space, okay, the sound staging and the space in the sound, and it's more coherent left to right across the board. And then in whatever is on input Y, it's a little bit more dynamically squelched. It's not quite as three-dimensional and holographic and all of that. And once I was really sure those were the differences I was hearing, I was like, okay, which one is which? Turn off the topping. I was like, okay, yep, that was the one that was on input Y. Okay. And so like in that kind of quasi-blind test, I definitely preferred the live micro DAC by a considerable margin here. Now the Centaurus has more features. It's more user-friendly. The interface is more friendly and all of that. But where the rubber really meets the road and where things have to sound good, it's honestly not particularly close between the Micro DAC and the Centaurus. Okay. And like similarly with the Bifrost 2, I think the Micro DAC just very by the thinnest of margins outperforms the Bifrost 2/64 these days. But the Bifrost 2/64 is also still comfortably ahead of what the Centaurus is doing, and for the same reasons I just described. A little bit more resolution to the sound, more holography, just an overall like more realistic and believable, lifelike kind of presentation to it, okay, in there as well. So those are some comparisons. So I think I can leave it here. So the topping Centaurus R2R DAC, again, a departure in style for topping because R2Rs typically don't measure very well. They've probably maximized the measurement effectiveness that is possible right now for R2R DACs. And it did improve the sound over previous toppings that I've heard, but it's just not quite yet on the pace set by other DACs in that $800 to $1,000 category. Some of them R2R, those are the ones that I talked about. Some of them not, right? It's just not quite there yet, but it is a step forward to my ears over Topping's previous DAC efforts. All right, so thanks again to Apos for loaning me this. Thanks again to all of you for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, comment if you have not already. I have channel memberships now, so if you want to help me keep doing this, please check out my channel memberships. There are benefits such as being able to talk to me on Discord, getting early access to my review videos, and hopefully soon I've got some ideas for exclusive content that I need a chance to get out there. So just keep an eye out for that. All right. Thanks again, everyone, for watching, and as always, enjoy the music.